Now, I am pleased to welcome our special guest. We have Dr. Risa Lavizzo-Mourey, who is the president of the Robert Wood Johnson Foundation, Indra Nooyi, who is chairman and CEO of PepsiCo. She is also the chairman of the Healthy Weight Commitment Foundation, and our moderator, Judy Woodruff, who is co-anchor and managing editor of PBS NewsHour. So join me in welcoming these wonderful leaders to the stage, and thank you very much for joining us.
Thank you, Lisa, very much. I'm delighted to be here to take part in this discussion of this issue that is so critical. I just want to say, as someone who comes from journalism, we're all paying a whole lot of attention these days to the fighting that's going on in the Middle East. I'll tell you, it's the lead of the NewsHour again tonight. You won't be surprised to hear. But at the same time, there are issues that are equally important going on in our own country. We know that obesity is something that not only has gotten more attention, it is an issue that affects the families, the lives of so many people today. It is, you could say, it's a health issue. It's a life or death issue for many Americans. And so to be able to spend this next hour with these two eminent leaders, Indra Nooyi and Risa Lavizzo-Mourey, to talk about this, something that both of them have spent so much time with, I think it's a real privilege for me. So there was the news just yesterday, both of you know, we were just talking about it, about the pledge. There's a new pledge on the part of beverage companies, and PepsiCo is part of that, to begin to look at cutting the calorie consumption in the next 5 years by 20%. But I really want to go back and look at the pledge that was made several years ago that the two of you were part of, to remove calories. It came about at a time when, yes, this issue was in the news, it was in conversation, but not nearly as much as it is today. So I'm curious to know from both of you, and Indra, I'll start with you, what brought this coalition together? It was a group of beverage and food companies, restaurants, the nonprofit sector. How did it all come about?
I should take you back. First of all, it's a joy to be here, Judy, and thank you all for coming to this forum. This journey actually started way back in 2007. I'd just become CEO of PepsiCo, and I was looking at the trends in the marketplace and realized that this trend towards health and wellness was real. And people were actually worried about how they're going to stay healthy, prevent any illnesses. And it was not just a trend that was fashionable, it was a trend that was sweeping across society. It was in its early stages, but it was going to become real. And I knew as a company which made a lot of fun-for-you products and some good-for-you products, we needed to accelerate the good-for-you journey. I knew that we had to do it as a company. And at the same time that we were beginning our journey to accelerate our growth of good-for-you products, one of my colleagues of the Yale board, Charlie Ellis, came to me and said, look, Indra, I know what you're doing, but I think you should sit down with Risa at the Robert Wood Johnson Foundation, because they're getting ready to spend $500 million to address this issue of childhood obesity. And I think you'll enjoy meeting Risa. So I actually called up Risa out of the blue, and I had two agendas in meeting Risa. One was, if I could have Risa tell me what she's doing and maybe use her as a catalyst to get PepsiCo to accelerate its efforts, would be great. Because, we were going down one direction, our portfolio was one way, we're now trying to transform the company. So it would help to have, some external pressure. In addition, if, some outside chance she would agree to partner with us, what a great example of industry and a great organization like the Robert Wood Johnson Foundation coming together. So I called up Risa, and she agreed to meet with me and take the call. And so that was our first meeting.
So what did you think when you got this phone call?
Well, let me start back a little further, because the Robert Wood Johnson Foundation in 2003, we were looking at different trends. The relentless rise in obesity, and particularly childhood obesity, was stunning. And we began thinking about how this could be an issue that we could try to help people build some momentum around changing. And then a few years later, we announced this pledge to invest $500 million in trying to reverse that trend. And when you put something out like that, the stakes are pretty high. And we also realize that it's not an issue that you can do just with philanthropy or with any one sector. And in fact, it was critically important to have the food industry involved. We needed to have good relationships. And so when Indra called me and we began talking, and I could begin to assess the strength of her commitment and the way that she was repositioning things as a leader, clearly we were looking for an opportunity to work with a committed leader in industry who could galvanize others within the field to make some changes.
I mean, there really wasn't a model for something like this. Was there, or was there? Was there something you were thinking about?
Not quite at that time, but what started as a dialogue between us then led on to, in 2008, I had to address the Grocery Manufacturers and the Retailers Association. And I thought I would lay out the case that Risa just made to explain that all the studies were pointing to the fact that the younger generation was going to live a shorter lifespan than the older generation because of obesity issues. And obesity affected your brain health. It led to so many other diseases. So it was a real societal issue that could not be addressed by NGOs or governments or food companies in isolation. Everybody had to come together to work to solve this issue. And there are many successful programs like Buckle Up and other programs like Keep America Beautiful that have actually worked when different people come together. So at that meeting, I was asked to give the keynote and I actually talked about this issue and asked the group of retailer and manufacturer CEOs if we could all come together to address this issue of obesity. And I was afraid to give that speech because I didn't know whether they'd boo me out of the room or listen to me. And I was pleasantly surprised that they gave me a standing ovation. Not me, the message, because I realized that everybody in that room were mothers and fathers and children themselves. They were all citizens of the community and they wanted to do the right thing. So there was born the Healthy Weight Commitment Foundation. And we decided as a group of companies, retailers and manufacturers to get together and to really figure out how we were going to improve the supply of food and beverage, reduce the calories of the food and beverage sold into the marketplace. So the Healthy Weight Commitment Foundation started. But here is our problem. Nobody trusts companies. They think that we say things and we don't follow through. So we knew that we needed somebody to independently assess whether we were doing the right thing and we were coming up with the right outcomes. So we contacted who else but Risa and said, Risa, would you agree to be our independent evaluator? And we were terrified, I'll be honest with you. Those of you who know Risa, she's not easy because once she decides, Risa, this is why I absolutely love her, because she decided as Robert Wood Johnson chief that she was going to address childhood obesity. She was not going to be moved off that true north goal. So we had to make sure, going to Robert Wood Johnson, that we knew what we were doing, because if we didn't, she was going to hold us accountable. So we went to the Robert Wood Johnson and said, would you serve as the independent evaluator of our commitment to lower calories? And therein was born the Healthy Weight Commitment Foundation, Robert Wood Johnson Alliance.
And putting the shoe on the other foot, Risa, I mean, health advocates do view, as Indra just said, in many cases, they view companies, the industry, as the bad guys in all of this. They're the ones who make the products that they argue contribute to some of the problems. So on your side, how much of a skepticism, doubt did you have to overcome?
Well, we have had a long tradition of doing independent evaluations and calling it as we see it. And yes, there is skepticism as I've gone around and talked to lots of people who are committed to this issue on the front line, mothers and fathers and principals and policymakers and people from industry. There's a lot of passion there. And we realized that if we were going to get away from the purely skeptical to more of a position of trust but accountability, We needed to have a study that was rigorous scientifically and where we could absolutely stand behind those results. So we were very happy to participate in this with the proviso that the data was going to be able to be public, that we were going to publish in peer-reviewed journals, and that we were going to call it as we saw it. And if the pledge wasn't met, we were going to report that as well. So there were high stakes on both sides, but we realized that if we were going to create a new kind of working relationship between people that are committed to this issue, but coming at it from different perspectives, we had to be able to advance the trust between different constituencies.
So, with all due respect, did you trust their motives? Did you think that they were in it for the right reason?
You know, I don't know that we talked a lot about motives. We talked a lot about the importance of achieving the goal. We talked a lot about how we would get there. And I think I certainly trusted that Indra was going to make sure that people came together to produce the data. But, you know, the motives weren't necessarily important. It was that we were results-oriented.
But Judy, I'd like to say something for the industry, too. All of us CEOs are not bad people. We do get up every morning saying, how can we make a difference? Because we are also citizens of the community. We have children. We care about obesity because we have employees and we don't want our healthcare costs to go up. So when the Healthy Weight Commitment Foundation came together and Lisa Gable was hired as our leader to actually manage this foundation, I don't believe we had a single meeting where people questioned our motives or why we should do it. It was more, how can we lean in to make sure that we actually make a change? Because everybody was a member of the Healthy Weight Commitment Foundation, and there were many, many companies, all the big companies and many of the retailers. Everybody was leaning in to say, how do we do better than the commitment that we promised that we would get to by 2015? We said we would take out 1.5 trillion calories from the diet. We took out more than 6 trillion calories from the diet. And so this was about a group of large and small company CEOs coming together and saying, how can we make a positive change in society?
Was it hard to work together, though, coming from different organizations, different, you were just talking about number of employees, 280 employees versus 280,000 employees at PepsiCo. How was that? I mean, looking at each other across the table with others, how did it work?
You know, one of the things that we coalesced around very early on was the science, and that we were going to be sure that we measured this in a way that was credible, that we were going to look at a number of calories that could make a difference in advancing this, and that's how we got to the 1.5 trillion. We are thrilled that they far exceeded that. So I think the fact that we looked at the issues from a scientific perspective helped bridge that gap in the ways that we usually might perceive things. We asked ourselves, let's make sure that when people look at this data, they're going to see it as credible data.
How significant is this, Indra, this 6.4 trillion fewer calories in 2012 than in 2007? What does that really mean to you?
So I'd say if you look across all of the categories of prepared foods or processed foods, if you want to call it, the reduction is somewhere between 12 and 30% of the calories in all the food offerings, depending on the category. So it's a significant reduction in the caloric intake of every family. And on an annual basis, think of it as a per capita reduction of about 20,000 calories per person, which is pretty significant. And I think that calories is one part of the equation. We now need to marry it up with more exercise and calories out. Get people to move, get people to engage in phys ed every day. That was the other part of the Healthy Weight Commitment Foundation, which is what can we do to get young children to do more exercise, especially in the schools, because today in the country, we do not have mandatory phys ed in schools every day, everyday phys ed in any state except Illinois, which is a real travesty. And so we had to put in place programs with incentives to get schools to eat healthy and get physically fit. which was another part of Healthy Weight Commitment Foundation. So we had to work the calories in and the calories out part of the equation to create a healthy society overall.
I want to just pick up on that. What is the significance of these calories? Another way of looking at it is it's about somewhere between 70 and 80 calories a day per person. And years ago, there was a study by Gortmaker and Wang that looked at what the number of calories were that you needed to reduce in children if you were going to halt the rise in obesity, prevent it, not necessarily address people who were already overweight or obese, but keep children from getting overweight. And it was, you know, under 200, 170, 60 calories. So when you're looking at reducing 70 to 80 calories per child, that's pretty significant in this overall need that we have, the gap that we're trying to address. So that's one way of thinking about it. And then the other that Indra has mentioned is absolutely true. We know that, and the Robert Wood Johnson Foundation has looked at both issues related to calories in, but also how much physical activity children are getting in schools and in other places where they spend a lot of time. Activities before school and after school. And there certainly have been gains in that area, not as much as we would like to see, but you are certainly seeing preschools that are committing to physical activity, after school activities by the Y and boys schools.
In addition to what
boys
the campaign
clubs and girls in addition. So those are the things that will help us achieve the goal of actually turning childhood obesity down permanently.
Indra, what are some of the specific things that PepsiCo did to bring this about, to make this happen?
I think it had to start within our company. You can't go and lead the Healthy Weight Commitment Foundation if you don't make substantial changes within the company. So we committed that we were going to transform our portfolio in significant ways. We were going to increase the permissibility of our Fun for You products. What do I mean by that? Sounds pretty exotic, but we said if we have Pepsi and Lay's and Doritos, let's reduce the salt and the fat content in our salty snacks and the sugar content in our beverages. How do we dial up the zero-calorie offerings? Okay, and how do we really dial up the good-for-you offerings, whether it's Quaker Oats or Tropicana or Naked Juice, make them more ubiquitously available, make sure they're priced in an affordable way, and make sure that no consumer has to make a trade-off between taste and health. Because in the past, if the product was good for you, it didn't taste as good as a Fun for You product. We didn't want people to make that choice. So we actually invested in R&D to make sure that the good for you product tasted as good as the Fun for You product. So we actually transformed the portfolio in fundamental ways. And it's a journey. We're in no way complete. But our goal is to have a everyday nutrition portfolio as part of PepsiCo, which is aspirationally coming closer to $30 billion by 2020. That's the goal we've set ourselves, and we're trying to get there. But what we want to do is use our distribution system, our branding, our formulation capabilities to make sure that good-for-you products are as ubiquitously available, as affordably priced, and as great tasting as the Fun for You products, and as aspirationally promoted. Because what you don't want is the Fun for You products like Pepsi and Lay's and Doritos having the greatest ads, and the good for you products having sort of ads like me, people like me drinking it or eating it. It's not quite the same. You want to have the young people, singing and dancing to Quaker and Tropicana too. Yeah. So the whole idea is, look, how do you make it aspirational?
I don't know. I think people would like to see it.
I think so too.
Sure, Risa.
So the 6.4 trillion, it sounds like, it's an enormous number, and clearly there's something to celebrate. At the same time, I was reading through the independent evaluations, and there are several points they made I want to ask both of you about. Risa, one of the points they said that even as the calorie count did drop over these years, there's no evidence, it said, that the U.S. food supply and diet overall has improved at the same time. It points out both children and adults still consume excess solid fats, added sugars, and sodium. And they say childhood obesity in 2011 and 12, exactly what it was in 2007 and 8, just under 17%. Adult obesity, 34, 35% then, still 34, 35%. So how do you respond?
Let me just take those in all together, each one by one. We are seeing changes in childhood obesity rates among the youngest children, 2 to 5. You actually have seen a decrease. And when you look at various places within the country, there are clear signs of progress. Back in 2003, 2004, there were very few places that you could point to where you were seeing leveling off and decreasing in childhood obesity rates. Now, going around the country, places like Anchorage, California, Kearney, Nebraska, places in Mississippi, West Virginia, they're clearly places where the childhood obesity rate is decreasing. And when you look overall, it is leveling off, as you just said. It's not relentlessly going up, which is what we were seeing before. Before something can start to turn down, it's got to level off. So we're seeing changes in the childhood obesity rates that are really significant and that we've got to pay attention to. When you look at what people are responding to in the marketplace, some of what Indra has already mentioned, and we've funded studies by the Hudson Institute. Hank Cardello has done those studies that show that people do prefer healthier foods, and there's a greater demand for those. Those are the parts of the market that are growing the fastest in industry. So we are seeing changes. And the trends that we see in the reduction in calories are ones that you can react to a trend in a couple of different ways. You can say, geez, let's buck that trend, or let's try to do what we can to accelerate it. And so when we look at the trends and the way that the industry has responded to those and are trying to continue to accelerate those downturns, we see those as things to pause and celebrate, because it wasn't what we were seeing 10 years ago, for sure.
Would you add anything to that?
Yeah,
about
I
this
agree
comment?
with what Risa is saying. And I think, look, industry has taken the first big step to start addressing this issue of calories in. 6.5 trillion calorie reduction is significant. Whichever way you look at it, that's an awful lot of calories. Industry has taken the first step in. I think now we have to build on this momentum and figure out what else can we do, coming together, industry, reputable organizations like the Robert Wood Johnson Foundation, governments, both at the federal level and the state level, policymakers. How can we all come together and address this issue in a more holistic way? I don't think industry by itself can address this issue as holistically as we need to address. Remember, it's got many facets. It's about the foods we sell. It's about school lunch programs. It's about phys ed. It's about sidewalks so kids can walk and move around. It's about playgrounds in every place. It's about curtailing the use of computers so nobody's thinking of video games as a physical exercise.
Right.
I think there's so many aspects we have to address that it requires all of us, well-meaning, responsible leaders to come together to come up with a holistic solution. Any one constituency operating on its own will not be able to address this issue.
You know, at RWJF, we talk about this in terms of a culture of health. If we're really going to move to the point where all children can have a healthy weight, we have to have a culture where the healthy products, the healthy choices are the default ones, the ones that are ubiquitous, the ones that we can choose without having to think about it. And I would just add one other aspect to this. We've got to market the products that are healthy as vigorously as we do the other products, so that kids begin to see those as as Indra said, the thing that they want. And I think there's certainly progress that we can make on that front.
Do you think is that something the industry looks at, that PepsiCo, that the industry is looking at?
I think so. I think you're seeing it's not just marketing it aggressively, it's marketing it aspirationally, making kids want it as opposed to parents forcing it on the kids. So I think it's happening now. You're seeing more healthy offerings advertised in more aspirational ways, so people are actually reaching for the healthy choice. And it's now becoming more acceptable in society to be seen with the healthy product as opposed to, you know, why are you drinking this stuff or eating this stuff? So I think societal trends actually favor the healthy product today. the healthier product.
Come in from your run or your workout and take a swig of water rather than, or something healthy to drink rather than a. All right, two other critiques I read that were part of the evaluation, and this I want to direct to you, Indra. They noted the post-pledge calorie declines were less than what would have been expected given trends already underway before the pledge. And they went on to remark on the fact that, and you read this outside the evaluation, the criticism that these companies knew ahead of time they were going to be able to do this, so this really wasn't such a heavy lift. How do you answer that?
So, again, I'm going to come back to Robert Wood Johnson Foundation. And the reason I keep coming back to RWJF is because the reputation of this organization is so phenomenal that if we can pass the RWJF screens, I think we've done pretty good. And you just heard Risa explain the calorie reduction, the fact that we have now stemmed the growth in calorie consumption, which is huge. And we're beginning to address calorie intake in the youngest children. And I look at those trends and I say industry has done pretty well for society as a whole. Now again, when you look at averages, and when you're looking to not applaud industry, you can find fault with any statistic that exists out there. But I say on balance, industry has done a very good job taking out more calories than we expected to take out. We didn't think we were going to hit 6.5 trillion calories because we didn't start with that as a goal. We started with 1.5 trillion calories as a goal. Remember, Judy, calorie intake was going up. So we had to first stop that calorie intake going up, and then we had to reduce it. So for us, it was a double challenge, right? And we had to do this at a point when diet products like Diet Pepsi, the consumption was going down. So those zero-calorie products were not growing as much as we wanted it to grow because society was moving away from those. So our challenge was actually much more significant than we're being given credit for. So I stand by the work of the industry, and I think the time has come for people to applaud industry for the progress made, because I don't think critics making their living strictly by picking on progress other people have made, because if you don't pick on them, you don't have a platform. I'm not sure that's the right outcome for many people today. I think the newer platform might be, why not give industry a compliment, then talk about the next step, as opposed to giving a compliment with one hand and slapping them with the other. I'm not sure that's the greatest thing.
Can I comment on that?
Yes.
And I won't slap you.
Go ahead.
At the Robert Wood Johnson Foundation and others, we are pretty true to our word, and we knew that we would be here being critical if the goal hadn't been met. Mm-hmm. And we publish a lot of reports that sometimes are less favorable. Mm-hmm. And so it was very important to us to say when a goal has been met, especially when it's been cleared by such a tremendous margin, and it was based on a goal that had some scientific basis, that it's important to pause and say, we met that goal. Mm-hmm. And we might not meet every goal that we set when we're trying to achieve something as significant and difficult as reversing childhood obesity or obesity more broadly. But it is important to recognize that this is a trend that is one that was not predictable when we started. Certainly when we got into this in 2003, and even in 2005, it was not predictable. So it's a significant thing to just pause, and that's part of the reason I wanted to be here today.
One of the questions, finally, one of the questions that was raised in the evaluation, this point that the calorie drop seemed to plateau in the final year of measurement, so that it raised the question of, is this a decline that can be sustained? And how do you keep it up? How do you keep it a vigorous improvement when you saw the final year? In other words, were the first years easy easier
Well,
because it was new, because it was different? And will it be harder from now on?
Well, I think whenever you're looking at trends like that, they're very rarely linear and following a slope that doesn't change at all. The fact that there's a change in the slope means that we've got to follow it longer, first of all, to see whether that's just a one-year aberration or there is something more to see there. And then we've got to understand where the changes were so that we can, as I said earlier, continue to accelerate this trend. You don't want to buck the trend. We want to do the things that are going to keep that trend moving downward.
This new pledge yesterday, Indra, from 3 of the major beverage soda companies. How is this different from this other pledge we've been discussing? What new do you think will happen
This
in
is
that
a
regard?
reduction of 20% of the calories sold by the beverage industry by 2025. So
10
basic-
years?
10 years, yeah.
Roughly.
And this is with the Clinton Foundation and the Alliance for a Healthy Generation and the American Heart Association. They're all part of the same organization. And this is a major commitment because at a point when diet drinks are not in vogue, we are saying that we will still commit to reducing calories by 20%, which means that we're going to shift portfolios to sell lower calorie options. We're going to go to smaller pack sizes, which means volume may be lower, but smaller pack sizes. And we're looking at reformulations, fundamental investment in R&D to search for new ingredients, new sweeteners, so people can still get a great experience in a beverage, but at a much lower calorie. So I think this 20% reduction in 10 years is a huge undertaking. And if the 3 companies together, I hate to call us a soda company. I mean, CSDs, or carbonated soft drinks, are 20-25% of our portfolio. So I wouldn't quite call us a soda company. Soda is one of our products, a great product. But all that I say is to reduce calories by 25%, 20-25% by 2025, 20% by 2025, God, is going to be a huge undertaking.
Is that harder than this one? And it's twice the length.
Well, this one was calories across food and beverage.
Right.
Multiple companies. It was hard because, remember, we didn't know what the other companies were doing until the calories were being counted at the end of the year by the independent assessor. And so you couldn't do whatever you wanted to do and hope somebody else was going to pick up the slack, because you never knew what was going to happen, right? So each company had to make sure their oar was in the water and they were rowing in the right direction. So Lisa Gable and the leadership team, all that they could do is make sure everybody was rowing in the right direction and hard. In this case, it's 3 companies predominantly, and we know what the goal is. If each of us reduced it 20%, we can make the goal. So it's a more measurable goal with a cleaner line of sight, but it's a harder goal because we're going to have to find some creative ways to find new sweeteners, new flavoring agents, whatever, to reduce the calorie level.
Risa, what's your take on that new goal that they've announced?
Well, it's a significant goal because we know that excess calories in beverages is a significant part of the calories that we could take out of the diet and have people have a healthier weight. So it's significant from that perspective. It's also one that they're saying they're going to measure the number of calories consumed, or decreasing by 20% the calories consumed. And so that's going to be tricky to go from what's sold to what's actually consumed. And I think that's one of the ways that independent evaluators and others in the scientific community will be looking at it. It's significant, it's hard to do, but it potentially could make a difference in healthy weight.
Indra, you talked a few minutes ago about how so much of the attention is on the industry, but it's of course a much bigger set of challenges, and that there are many more actors who can have an effect on the outcomes in an attempt to reduce obesity. What about the role of of the public sector, of government. I mean, clearly there have been attempts in states to impose taxes. You had the highly publicized Michael Bloomberg effort in New York to ban supersized sodas. I mean, other efforts with labeling. How do you see all that? Is there a role for government in this? Should it just be left to the industry to joint efforts like the one that you and Robert Wood Johnson engaged in?
I think the role of government, the role of NGOs, the role of policymakers, I think has got to be much broader than just saying, let's ban supersized sodas or whatever. I don't think we want to become a nanny state. That was never, that should never be our goal. Freedom of choice is very important. Personal accountability and responsibility is very important. I think governments have to play a role, federal and state level. How do we improve the quality of lunches in schools? Really good quality lunches in schools. We spend the highest per student on education as a nation. Why is our school lunch program not as nutritionally outstanding as it could be? Why don't we have mandatory phys ed every day for an hour in schools? Why don't we? I think we've got to go back and re-examine all of that. Why don't we say that towns have to have a sidewalk and encourage people to walk? Why don't we have playgrounds in communities and not have the worry of litigation all the time if somebody falls down and gets hurt? I think we have so many issues we have to address. I think what we've chosen to do is point the finger at food and beverage companies when we've pointed a finger at ourselves in addressing the issue. But then we assume that if you impose taxes on them, everything is going to get taken care of. It's not. It's a slippery slope. You've got private label manufacturers who don't even fall under the purview of the branded manufacturers. You've got a whole unorganized restaurant trade that has food choices that don't come under the purview of these branded manufacturers. So I think we've got to approach this as a complex problem that requires a multifaceted solution as opposed to a simple solution, which is tax the company or make bans happen. I don't think that's going to work.
Risa, how do you come down on this in terms of the role of government, and what about some of the things that Indra is suggesting?
Well, I think that it's going to take a comprehensive approach to have substantial gains. And here I would point to Philadelphia, a place where you've seen decreases in childhood obesity across socioeconomic groups and across racial and ethnic groups. And the approach has been a comprehensive one that provides greater access for healthy foods by getting supermarkets in neighborhoods where there weren't any before, but also increases the availability of healthy foods in corner stores. 600 corner stores now have healthy foods that are prominently placed, and that was in part an effort of government and the policymakers, but also an investment in bike lanes and sidewalks and in making the schools healthier. So it took a combination of approaches, both public and private, and wherever you go around the country that we're starting to see impressive changes, maybe not across socioeconomic and racial and ethnic groups the way you're seeing it in Philadelphia. One of the hallmarks are a comprehensive approach.
What about some of the things we mentioned, government doing what New York tried to do, limiting the size of drinks, requiring labels, or putting a tax on drinks that have sugar or food that has salt? I mean, you don't know in what direction this could take.
You know, one of the things we've always been committed to at the Foundation is evaluating public policy changes and seeing what works. And we're committed to that. If there are these kinds of changes that are happening locally and we can do a comprehensive and credible evaluation of it and see whether or not it's a public policy that ought to be advanced, that's what we're committed to doing.
I want to ask the both of you, and again, we're going to be taking questions from the audience in a minute, but what is your vision of what healthy food and beverage choices should be? I mean, what would, is it just let 1,000 flowers bloom, everything? Should there be just a more concerted campaign everywhere to educate people on healthy foods and healthy lifestyle, which is, of course, what we're here to talk about? But how far should we take this? I mean, what kind of how do you envision your children and grandchildren? What should it be like for them when they get up in the morning? How many choices should they have? What kind of ads should they see on television, and so forth?
I'll let Dr. Risa talk about it first before I chip in.
Well, you know, I go back to making sure that wherever you live, you know, whether you are in a wealthy community or not, you should have access to the healthy choice being readily available. And so that means not having to think about whether, as you're, you know, driving to the mall and taking your kids there, there's going to be access to healthy choices. That means that the restaurants that are now starting to move towards healthier fare for kids, we would have those in every community. It means that when you are taking your young preschool child to daycare, you're going to know that they have physical activity there and that they're going to be healthy choices. The healthy choice should be one that is the default choice, the easy choice. And that's when we get to a culture that really values health, those will be the kinds of things that we won't have to think about. And that, so when I look to the future and one where we are really valuing health, that's what I see.
How far away are we from that, do you think?
I don't know, when you travel around the world and you come back to the US, you realize that we have abundant food available here at a very affordable price. And therefore, we might be just putting out an incredible array of foods that may not be all nutritious out into the marketplace. First of all, I think our incentives for agriculture and incentives for nutrition are misaligned. We don't have as many incentives for fruit and vegetable as we do for maybe corn or something. I'm not suggesting you take away those incentives. How do you line up the incentives for nutrition and the incentives for agriculture? The second, how do you address portion control? I think that's a big issue. You know, if you really want to talk about how do you address the societal issue holistically, if growth in a particular company's revenue is going to come from offering more and more food for a value price, and that's how you bring the consumer in. You know, we used to be in the restaurant business. I know how this thing works. It's a tough one. So are we willing to address portion control? Are we willing to address you know, the amount of nutrients or lack thereof in unregulated food, defined as, you know, street corners and any place where you can pick up a meal. But let me turn this around, Judy. I think personal accountability is very important. I think we should educate people. As Risa said, we should make healthy food as available and as affordably priced as the fun foods. Okay, make everything available. But ultimately, we cannot be a nanny state. We cannot tell people what to eat and drink. We can guide them, and we can educate them on making the right choices. And you know, through the healthcare system, we might be able to provide some incentives and some, you know, disincentives if people don't remain healthy. But I think trying to over-regulate food and beverage, what's available in the marketplace, is, I think, a slippery slope. Your definition of health may be very different than my definition of health. You might drink a diet soda. I like to drink a full sugar soda. I think that's fine because I might drink it 2 or 3 times a week. You might drink a diet soda every day. Are you more healthy than I am? I don't know. It's your choice versus mine. So I think we have to be very, very careful, not legislating health, but educating people to make the right choices. And I think it's a tricky balance, but that's what we ought to get to.
How do you feel about that? What do you think?
I think that there are clear incentives that we can provide to people to be healthier, and a lot of those incentives have to be in the places where we spend our time, where we work, where we send our kids to school, the kind of communities that we live in. The environment that people live in does affect the choices that they make. There's no question that individual responsibility plays a huge role, but we also have to figure out how to create those environments that make it easier for them to choose to make the choices. And then a part of, as Indra says, guiding or educating, is making sure that as we market products, we're making sure that people understand that there are healthier products that they can have fun with. Mm-hmm. I go back to the example of Bird's Eye and the way that they were able to increase the consumption of vegetables among children, by pairing it with fun characters. So we've got to use this whole array of tools and incentives that we have to create not only the movement towards individual choice, but also the environments that make those choices easy to make.
But in creating those environments, it sounds to me like you're saying that's more than something more than just individuals can do, that it's up to some of the bigger actors here.
We started off talking about the importance of leadership here, that it's leadership across sectors, and that includes governments and businesses and schools and philanthropies like ours. Mm-hmm.
How do you, Indra, we've been talking about this in many different ways through the time we've been having this conversation, but do you think the public understands sort of the way the system works? Do you think they need to be better educated? And you've been saying this in so many words about their own responsibility. Because people do go into grocery stores and they look, or they go into a restaurant, and they may not ask many questions. They just look at what's there and they take it. So what more do people need to be thinking about when they think about these questions of, what's healthy and what isn't, and my choice or not my choice?
I think we are making progress, Judy. I have 2 kids that have gone through the school system, and I watched their science class education change. And they're being educated now on what's healthy and how to eat consistent with the food plate, now no longer the pyramid, the plate, which is much easier to understand. I think kids are getting more and more aware of what's health. I think what happens is, especially when people's budgets are pinched, right? They go to a store or a restaurant and look for what can they get a lot of for the lowest outlay of dollars. And typically that tends to be something that is high in the not so desirable nutrients, because we haven't lined up the incentives for agriculture and nutritionists yet. So what we end up with is perhaps the not so healthy food. So I think we have to rethink how we help people on very low budgets for food make the healthy choice. And it goes back to what Risa said, in food deserts, in inner cities, how do you make sure you have fruit and vegetable and healthy foods available at an affordable price, as opposed to the fruit and vegetable cost so much that they cannot afford it on their budget? How do you do that? How do you make sure that you have more portion control? I think the biggest thing that hit me, even going from the bi-coastal parts of the country to other parts of the country, and then coming from Europe to the United States, is our portions are fundamentally larger than anything we see anywhere else in the world. How do we control portion sizes in restaurants? I think there's a lot of work we have to do to get people to eat healthier. Education is one, but even educating the supply of all foods, not just processed foods, but all foods that are sold to consumers, is something we have to work on.
And there are bright spots that we can point to. There are restaurants, quick food restaurants that are now starting to have kid-sized portions of things like French fries and apples instead of other desserts as part of the default meal. Right. Not putting soda in with those, children's meals, but low-fat milk and things that we know are good, have good nutritional value. So they're bright spots that we can see that, again, not only help shape what people demand and the way that they see their food choices over a lifetime, but also will help to address those issues of what the right portion should be.
Mm-hmm. So we have a couple of questions from the audience. One of them is, it really is, it's building on what you've been talking about, but where do you see other opportunities for industry, philanthropy, nonprofit to work together to address the obesity epidemic? What more can be done? This current campaign, I guess it comes to an end, at the end of the 5, how many more years does it go on?
It doesn't really come to an end. We just renew it. We look for the next thing to do.
So what more can you do working together, do you think?
You're talking about other industries or staying within
your industries and beyond, but
the obesity.
I think within this industry, one of the things that we really need to start to address is the gap that we see in the availability of healthy foods by income. And Indra spoke about this earlier. One of the things we're very concerned about is that this rise in childhood obesity has started to level off, but we're not seeing the same change in low-income communities and in African American and Latino communities. We also know that there tends to be more marketing of unhealthy foods in these communities. And so we want to make sure that we, as we're addressing this, we think of ways that we can all work together to reduce that gap, because we're not going to see a real benefit and a leveling off and a reduction of childhood obesity until we're able to address it in all the communities, especially those where there's a disproportionate risk.
She's mentioned marketing now several times. How do you see that fitting into the goal here?
I speak for our company. I mean, we have a commitment not to market to children any product that is high in sugar or fat. So we have one of the early people who made that commitment, and we've honored that commitment. We don't sell sugary beverages in elementary and middle schools. So I think from a marketing perspective, we're doing a pretty good job. But again, to Risa's point, we're not the only company. It's everybody who supplies food and beverage, whether it's retailers, whether it's restaurateurs, whatever. I think the entire food supply has to lean in to say, what are we going to do to make sure that we price the healthy choice as affordably as we do the fun choice, that we make the healthy choice as available as the fun choice, and as tasty as the fun choice. Because when somebody has to make a choice between taste and health, they always go for the taste. So there's work to do, and it's not easy to formulate healthy products that taste as good as the fun products, because the fun products are fun because they have more sugar or fat, okay? They taste great. So how do you get that fantastic taste into the healthy products? So that's the challenge that many companies have. Big companies like ours can put the monies in, the resources to do it. Many others who are in one-off restaurants have a tough time doing it.
This question comes from, it sounds like she's a student at American University. She says, I definitely think the calorie cutback's an amazing initiative, has come along so well with positive results. She says, however, I think healthy eating is still a challenging issue in terms of cost. She says organic food and organic good consumption is a trend, but it's fairly expensive to maintain. Many people can't afford to do this. Being healthy, she says, costs money. So her question is, how can the private sector and companies like PepsiCo, working with others, address that? How can demand be met at affordable prices? And this is an address to PepsiCo, but to other companies too.
Look, organic, natural, all of these products, there isn't enough of a food supply that is certified organic today. There's just not enough. If everybody in the country chose to eat organic, we wouldn't have enough to supply them, okay? We have a food supply that's geared for mass production. That's what it is. When we decide that we're going to change the entire food supply, and we go to portion control, and we go to different incentives for agriculture, we might be able to, over the next 2 decades, change the food supply. Cannot be done by one company. It cannot be done just by manufacturers. It's got to be done with the Department of Agriculture. It's got to be done with the entire farmers and the growing community, and it'll be a tough transition. But let me just say, the food supply we have in the US is very, very good. It's a lot, that's a different issue, but it's very, very good. It's safe, it's of high quality, and perhaps the best in the world. It's what we do with it and how we create food from it and what we offer the consumers is what we have to focus on. I don't know why organic is more healthy than something that's not certified organic. I've never been able to understand that, okay? So I'm not sure, again, it goes back to the question on what is your definition of health versus mine, okay? Something can be organic and have twice as many calories as something that is not certified organic but half the calories. Which is more healthy? I don't know, it's your definition versus mine. But I think we should work with the food supply we have in the US today, which is very, very good, and figure out how to educate society and nudge them towards the healthier, portion-controlled choice.
And what about this concept that healthy eating is more expensive?
I think that if you look at things like fresh fruits and vegetables, and particularly if you live in a community where it isn't available in a supermarket or other place, farmer's market, it can be more expensive, and that's one of the reasons that we think that we need to be committed to making sure that not necessarily organic, but fresh fruits, vegetables are available in all neighborhoods.
And there's another question, Indra, taking us international. This person writes, they know you travel, PepsiCo, of course, is in how many countries?
200.
Only 200. But they ask, are there examples in other countries for achieving a healthier society? I think we all think of, you know, people directly buying food at the market, going to the market every day, bringing it home and cooking. I mean, are there examples elsewhere that the U.S. should be looking to, or are we unique and we really have to figure it out on our own?
I don't think it's about just going to the market and buying healthy food. It's what we eat itself has to go through a change. I mean, the Mediterranean diet is very, very good. Parts of the Japanese, the Chinese diet are good. But again, a lot has got to do with genetics too. Where do you come from? What's your fundamental genetic makeup? And what kind of food suits your genetic makeup? Right now, I'd say the only evidence we have is that the Mediterranean diet is pretty good. But I think rather than look to some other country as to who eats healthier and what can we bring here, I think the question we have to ask ourselves, given our history, given the kind of foods that we grew up with, given what's available here plentifully, how do we work with what we've got to change what we provide to consumers, whether it's fresh fruit and vegetables, whether it's prepared meals that are healthier, whether it's portion control, whether it's lower sugar, lower fat content. How do we fundamentally change the offerings that we give to consumers? And I think we can make a change right here in the US if we put our minds to it.
Risa, am I right that the US has an obesity problem worse than any other country anywhere, or not?
I think it's pretty well acknowledged that we are in the lead here, although there are certainly countries that are catching up to us. Our neighbors to the south, Mexico is one. So yes, we need to lead in finding the solutions to this worldwide as well.
How do you, this is an interesting question. You can take it in different directions. Indra, or actually I'll start with you, Risa. How do you align the goals of your individual organizations with larger societal goals? It's a big question. You want me to go to Indra first?
No. You know, one of the goals that we have as an organization is to help people be healthier. And when we think about the role that health plays in our society, it's pretty easy to align that with larger societal goals as well. Health is one of the things that's associated with our ability to live the kind of lives we want to live, to have a military that is able to recruit people and keep people in the military. It's associated with our businesses being able to be vital. Health is associated with high education levels and with the ability of people to perform well in school. So we look at our goal of trying to improve health and make health one of the fundamental values that we have as a country as one that really helps us in every domain to achieve the kind of goals and outcomes that we want to achieve as individuals, as families, as neighborhoods, and as a nation. So we're always looking for that intersection between where helping people be healthier is going to help them achieve the goals that they want to achieve in other aspects of their life.
I think aligning a company's goals with societal goals is critical if a company wants to attract the best and the brightest. And it's way beyond health. I think it's about our carbon footprint, how much water we use in some countries, how we treat employees. They're all part of aligning our goals with societal goals. I'd say the biggest change all of us corporate leaders have to do, Judy, is not think about aligning our goals with societal goals, is how we spend the money we make. Because we always think, you make the money and then you do a couple of CSR programs somewhere, fund a village in Africa or India or something and say, I've done a pretty good job. I don't think that's aligning our goals with societal goals. I think it's rethinking how we make money. Are we making money for PepsiCo by transforming the portfolio? Are we making money by reducing the amount of plastic we send to landfill, reducing our water usage, carbon footprint? Are we making money by bringing the best and brightest in because we treat them well? If we rethink it in terms of running business the right and responsible way, and that's the way we make money, then we're aligning our interests with societal interests and actually making our people feel like they can bring their whole self to work. As opposed to most people in companies today park themselves at the door, they walk into the company and they're a company employee, they pick themselves up in the evening and say, I'm now a mom or dad or a member of the community. I think that's wrong. We are trying to make it seamless and say, we want to change how we make money. And that's why we call our overall goal as deliver performance with purpose. And our purpose is transforming the portfolio, being a better environmental citizen, and treating our people very, very well. And that's what stood us in good stead over time. I think there's a way to do it.
Okay, we're just about at the end. I want to ask each of you to conclude by just telling this audience, the audience watching online, on television, where do you think this battle against obesity stands right now, and what's the most important thing people need to know that what you're doing is gonna succeed? Risa, to you first.
Well, I think we are on a long generational journey to really reverse obesity in this country. We clearly have signs of progress. Some of which we've already talked about, the fact that there are places you can look and see not only is the rise halted, but it's starting to go down. So we're seeing progress, and we are going to have to think about comprehensive approaches to the problem. There's no single silver bullet or single policy or single company that is going to be able to make it happen. It will take working across sectors and true leadership, and the ability to take a hard look when we stumble and we don't make the progress we want at why that was, and then redouble our efforts.
I fully agree with what Risa said. Nothing more to add.
All right. On that rare note of agreement in this city of Washington, D.C., I want to thank both of you. Indra Nooyi, Risa Lavizzo-Mourey, we thank you very much. It's been my pleasure to be part of the conversation. Let's turn it back to Lisa, I think, for a final thank you and goodbye.
Great. Well, we're going to, again, please join me in a warm thanks of, thank you. We're going to let our guests move off the stage now. I know that they have meetings that they need to go to, and we really greatly appreciate everyone taking their time. We know that Risa and Indra and Judy have incredibly packed schedules, and you all do too. So we thank you for your friendship. We thank you for your support over these last 5 years, and it's been a pleasure seeing you all again. So thanks.